It is week 3 of our series, Free People, where we're talking about the relationship between freedom and rules. Now, maybe this sounds strange, but when I think about following the rules, I think about zombies.
Guys, there's some kind of infection at the party that's making people act weird and bite each other. We need to coordinate an orderly evacuation without causing unnecessary panic.
Holy crap, Leonard's a zombie! Zombie attack!
Remember when zombies were everywhere? I don't mean literally like everywhere, but I mean in movies and TVs and comic books and walking around your neighborhood on Halloween. I don't know how you feel about zombie movies, but I think they're incredibly terrifying. Yes, because of zombies. Also because of the way everyone immediately starts to turn against each other as soon as zombies show up. Civilization collapses, rules and laws just completely disappear. Suddenly it's everyone for themselves. For the last couple of weeks, we have been talking about how there are some rules that we really just hate to follow, but at the same time, rules are necessary. The people in your favorite zombie story might technically be free of the laws and rules, but that kind of life isn't freedom. Not when everyone is against each other and only looking out for themselves. Okay, so maybe you wouldn't want to live in a world where there are absolutely zero rules, but what's a better option? Oh, I know. A place where you're in charge and you get to make all the rules. If you were king or queen for a day, what would you do? What rules would you want to make or break right away? If you're watching this with a small group or your family or some friends, feel free to pause the video here and chat this through. And when you're all done, just start it all up again. All right, pause now. Welcome back. Okay, so being in charge sounds pretty fun, right? You could fill your calendar with things that you like to do, and you could skip through the ones that you don't. You could cancel the classes at school you don't like. You could just cancel school altogether. Maybe pass laws that make your life a little bit more fun and happy and convenient. There's this old movie called Click, where Adam Sandler plays a character that somehow gets his hands on a remote control that was able to control his whole life.
Click. Plants catch?
Yeah, but your kid stinks.
Ah. A regular Derek Jeter right there.
Maybe it seems like it would be awesome to have this kind of power, but as you can probably imagine, this kind of power can lead to some big problems. I mean, what if you weren't the person in control? What if someone else had the power? They could do whatever they wanted, and their wants would probably be different than yours. Or what if there's more than one remote? You might want to cancel math class and study only history, while they might want to do an all-day gym class. You make a law telling everyone to pay you $1 a day just for being awesome, but they'd want that dollar to go to them instead. Where would it stop? The craziness would never end. We all want our freedom to do our own thing, but if everyone wants different things, how do we decide who gets what they want? It's not an easy balance to strike. The balance between what we want and what others want. Sometimes we're not sure how to compromise, and most of the time we don't even want to compromise. Most of the time we want to make decisions that benefit us. For the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about the most important rule God ever gave us. And although some people think God needs us to obey a long list of rules, Jesus said that there is only one law that matters the most, the law of love.
At that point, Peter got up the nerve to ask, "Master, how many times do I forgive a brother or sister who hurts me? 7? Jesus replied, 7, hardly. Try 70 times 7. The kingdom of God is like a king who decided to square accounts with his servants. As he got underway, one servant was brought before him who had run up a debt of $100,000. He couldn't pay up, so the king ordered the man, along with his wife, children, and goods, to be auctioned off at the slave market. The poor wretch threw himself at the king and begged, 'Give me a chance and I'll pay it all back.' Touched by his plea, the king let him off, erasing the debt. The servant was no sooner out of the room when he came upon one of his fellow servants, who owed him $10. He seized him by the throat and demanded, 'Pay up now!' The poor wretch threw himself down and begged, 'Give me a chance and I'll pay it back,' but he wouldn't do it. He had him arrested and put in jail until the debt was paid. When the other servants saw this going on, they were outraged, and they brought a detailed report to the king. The king summoned the man and said, 'You evil servant, I gave you your entire debt when you begged me for mercy. Shouldn't you be compelled to be merciful to your fellow servant who asked for mercy?' The king was furious and put the screws to the man until he paid back his entire debt. And that's exactly what my Father in heaven is going to do to each and every one of you who doesn't forgive unconditionally anyone who asks for mercy.
According to Jesus, following God comes down to this: love God and love others as you love yourself. The greatest commandment sounds simple, but it's not that easy to do. If you've been here for the last couple of weeks, you should know about James by now. This is James. He was a brother of Jesus and leader of the Jerusalem church during the early years of the Jesus movement. During that time, he wrote a letter to the early followers of Jesus, and you can now find in the Bible his letter as the book of James. In this letter, James was trying to help these Jesus followers learn how to obey God's law, the law of love. He wasn't a king, but he was still a very powerful person. Because he led one of the most important communities of Jesus followers at the time, people wanted to hear what he had to say. He also had a reputation for being just and fair, as illustrated by his nickname, James the Just. James had a lot of authority, power, and influence, and people from all over looked to James for wisdom. So when a dispute rose among a bunch of churches from different regions, they looked for James to judge the dispute and made a ruling on who was right and who was wrong. We can read about this in Acts 15, but here it is really quickly. Most of the first followers of Jesus were Jewish people who believed Jesus was the Messiah God had promised. But not everyone who followed Jesus was from a Jewish background. Some of these early Jesus followers believed everyone needed to convert to Judaism in order to follow Jesus, and that conversion was not an easy process. There were other Jesus followers that believed that the only thing anyone needed to do to follow Jesus was to trust and commit to following him. So James was in the middle. He listened carefully to all the perspectives and made a decision that no one should be forced to go through lots of difficult steps in order to follow Jesus. Did that decision make James uncomfortable? Probably. Would it have been easier for James to tell everyone that they had to become Jewish before they became Christians? I think so, because James grew up Jewish and he followed Jewish laws, and so it would have been comfortable to tell others to do what he had done. But James took a more difficult path. James understood that his decision wouldn't impact God's love for him. He was free to do whatever he wanted to do. But James was also committed to following Jesus' law of love, and he knew the most loving thing he could do was to make it easy for others to know Jesus. James decided his comfort was not as important as loving others. I wonder if James was thinking about the situation when he wrote these words in James 2.
Speak and act as those who are going to be judged by the law that gives freedom, because judgment without mercy will be shown to anyone who has not been merciful. Mercy triumphs over judgment.
So the law gives us freedom. God's law, the law of love, gives us freedom. We're free to make the decisions that benefit us and give us what we want, if that's what we want. God's not going to stop us or love us any less, but we need to prepare for judgment. God's law of love gives us freedom, but we're still called to speak and act out of love for God and for others. This is the thing that we're going to be judged on. There will be no mercy for the unmerciful. James, when he says that, he's not threatening us. He's reminding us that justice has a way of coming back around. When we mistreat people, when we take advantage of others, when we consistently prioritize ourselves over others, we will eventually face consequences. But God is merciful to the merciful. When we're compassionate, when we're forgiving, when we're gracious to each other, God sees that. You could say that we have the freedom to treat people however we'd like, but when we live in a way that prioritizes our wants and comfort at the expense of others, we're not really free. That's why Jesus told us the most important thing we can do besides loving God isn't just to love ourselves, but to love others like we love ourselves. That's why the book of James tells us to show mercy to others instead of judgment, because we'll never live freely as long as we're only living for ourselves. There is only one thing we will someday answer for. How did we love God and love others? We can make decisions that benefit only ourselves, but free people make decisions that benefit others. So now what? Let's think back to the decision James had to make. If you were an early follower of Jesus, how do you think you would have responded? Would you have wanted all the new Jesus followers to go through all the same steps you went through to become Jewish? Do you think you'd been okay with putting your comfort and traditions and experiences aside for the sake of others? What would you do if you disagree with the people making the final decision? It's almost impossible to put ourselves in the shoes of these early followers of Jesus, but their disagreement is similar to a lot of the disagreements that we have with each other today. This wasn't a good versus evil kind of debate. Everyone involved was trying to do what was good, right, and honoring to God. There wasn't a clear answer. Everyone in the conversation had the same goal, to see people come to know Jesus, but they disagreed about how to achieve that goal. There were probably some people who got angry at James' decision and couldn't understand his point of view. James ultimately made a decision that prioritized others over himself, and I'm kind of glad he did. If James had chosen differently, you and I might never have had the opportunity to follow Jesus. James knew difficult decisions rarely have a clear yes or no, right or wrong answer, especially when you're in a decision-making position like James was in. So when we're faced with a difficult decision, maybe we shouldn't think in terms of what's right and wrong. Maybe it's more helpful to think like this: what's best for me or what's best for others? Anyone can make a decision that benefits only them, but Jesus calls us to a different way of living that follows his law of love. So let's see how good we are at figuring out how to make decisions that benefit others. Remember earlier when we shared what we do if we were king or queen for a day? Let's do that again, but this time, let's see if we can make a decision that benefits others. If you were king or queen for a day, how would you make decisions to benefit others? Again, if you're watching this with a small group or your family or some friends, feel free to pause the video and chat this through. And when you're all done, just start it up again. Pause now. Someday in the future, there will be a time when you're in charge. You might be in charge of a group project. You might be a captain on your team. You might be someone's boss. You might mentor someone younger than yourself. You might become a parent. Throughout your life, you're gonna have plenty of chances to be in charge, to make the rules, to make big decisions. That's a lot of authority for one person. So when you're in charge, what should you do with all that power? You're gonna be tempted to use it for your own gain, but don't. Using your authority for your own gain might be nice for a moment, but it's not gonna be satisfying in the long run. Instead, follow James's lead. Be wise, merciful, and led by the Spirit. Use your powers to benefit others, not just yourself. But this isn't something that you have to wait to practice for. You don't need to have kids or employees or people under your command in order to lead with love. You can make that decision to benefit others every day, right now, like the way that you treat your family, what you do for your friends, how you use your time and your money and your talents. If you aren't putting others first and over yourself right now, gaining more power and influence won't make you suddenly care about others more than yourself. That journey starts right now, today. So how can you leverage the influence and power you already have to benefit others? What ways do you already have influence? Are you influential in your friend group, on social media, on your team, or maybe with a younger family member? What kind of decisions do you have the power to influence at home and at school, at church, in your group of friends, in the world around you? How will you manage the influence and power you already have? Will you use it to benefit yourself or benefit others? Thanks to Jesus, we have freedom, but we'll never live freely as long as we're only living for ourselves. Free people make decisions that benefit others.